Hey there, pipe makers, it's Mason from Rig Pipes, and today we're going to be talking about some of the differences between acrylic and ebonite as materials for making pipe stems. Let's check it out. When we're making pipes, the standard material that we'll use for the stummel is briar. So we're generally pretty set when we have our stummel. But the big question that a lot of newer pipe makers have to ask themselves is, when you're working with a stem, when you're going to make a stem, are you going to use acrylic or plastic, or ebonite slash vulcanite? What's the difference? Well, let's first talk about just in general what they are, and then we can talk about the pros and cons of each. With acrylic, basically acrylic is a broad category of any of the plastics that you're going to see. So if something says acrylic, they're talking about some type of lucite, some type of plastic. So on to ebonite, otherwise known as vulcanite. The terms are roughly interchangeable, so I'll just call it ebonite for the purposes of this video. What ebonite is, it is a vulcanized rubber material. It's the same material that's used on clarinet mouthpieces, saxophone mouthpieces. It is the traditional, time-honored material that we use in pipe making. So, if someone wants a traditional pipe with a black ebonite stem, that's what you're going to be looking at. So, by the way, there are different grades of ebonite. Generally speaking, Japanese ebonite is going to be a little bit lower quality, and German ebonite is going to be a little bit higher quality, but that's a video for another time. So, what are the differences between ebonite and acrylic? There are pros and cons to each, and it depends on if you're looking from the perspective of the pipe maker or the pipe smoker. So, let's start off with, from the pipe maker's perspective, what do I look for in a pipe stem material? Generally speaking, ebonite is easier to work than acrylic. Acrylic has a tendency, if you're drilling it on a lathe or if you're shaping it on a lathe, because it is a plastic, if you're going too fast, you can actually melt it. And it tends to chip off more than it comes off in beautiful little ribbons like on ebonite. If you are using acrylic, you want to be working at a slower speed with very, very sharp tools. You want sharp tools, obviously, with ebonite too, but on acrylic, you really can't cut it with dull tools quickly, because it'll melt and it'll deform, and you're going to have a really tough time. So, from a pipe maker's perspective, that's the key difference. Is that ebonite, you're not going to melt the ebonite by running it at too high of a speed. Another difference, ebonite is generally easier to polish, it's easier to sand. Just all around, I personally prefer working with ebonite, unless, and this is where acrylic really shines, unless I'm working and I want to use a specific color. Let's be honest, if you're looking for a pipe stem that just pops, that has this beautiful color that contrasts with the pipe, or anything like that, if you're really wanting to experiment with color, there's no other game in town than acrylic. Because acrylic, you can achieve these bright, beautiful colors that to some extent you can achieve with ebonite, but they're just really not in the same ballpark. So if you're wanting to experiment with those bright, bold, swirly colors and things like that, I would look at acrylic. Now, those are all from the pipe maker's perspective. Now, from the pipe smoker's perspective, what are the key differences? Well, there are a lot of myths about ebonite and acrylic. One of the primary ones is that cheaper pipes have acrylic stems, and masterfully made pipes have ebonite stems. I mean, that's just not true whatsoever. So there are a couple of reasons to use acrylic other than ebonite. One, primarily color. So one of the biggest myths about ebonite versus acrylic is that acrylic is a cheap material that goes on cheap pipes, and ebonite is an expensive material that goes on well-made pipes. That's just not true whatsoever. There are uses for each. One of the things that you'll find with ebonite as a pipe smoker is it's generally a little bit softer in the mouth. It doesn't have that cold, hard, plasticky feeling. It feels a little more organic. It feels a little more like... So if you're wanting to make a more traditional pipe, I would lean towards Ebonite. Now, one of the things that you might want to consider is the fact that Ebonite over time will actually oxidize. What does that mean? It means that it will turn this dull greenish, grayish color, and it will oxidize when it's exposed to the atmosphere. Acrylic does not do that. So if you have a black stem, it's going to stay a black stem, you know, until the end of time. You all know about the seagulls and the sea turtles who like eat plastic in the ocean because plastic just never goes away. Same thing, these acrylic stems, the only way you're ever going to mess them up is like if you bite through them. So that's one thing to consider. All of those things taken into consideration, let's just go over them real quickly. Basically, Ebonite, it's easier to work. You're not going to melt it. Acrylic you might. With Ebonite, it's easier to polish. Ebonite has a more organic, natural feeling in the mouth, and for some pipe smokers, it's a little more comfortable and they prefer that. But generally speaking, Ebonite is considered the superior material if what you're going for is the ultimate pure smoking experience. You would be looking at Ebonite. Now, the pros of acrylic, it's not going to oxidize on you. You make the stem stays the same. The biggest advantage of acrylic is, let's be honest, the color. That would be the main pros and cons of each. I hope that really helped you.